Hello students, welcome to this session. In this session, we are going to explore contemporary issues and theories of motor control learning. So, the motor control learning refers to how the brain and nervous system acquires, refine, and adapt movement patterns. It's what allows us to learn new skills, improve performance, and recover motor functions after injury. So, this particular topic is very crucial because uh, it connects neuroscience, rehabilitation, and human-machine interface. So, let's start the topic. So, let's first define motor control. So, motor control is a systematic transmission of nerve impulses from the motor cortex to motor units. So which results in a coordinated contraction of muscles to produce movement. So for example, when we think about something like walking or reaching for an object, the process begins with motion intentions, and that motor intention is generated by higher brain center, what we call as supraspinal inputs. These signals, together with the afferent feedback from the body, modulate the basic locomotor pattern that are organized within a network of spinal interneurons. This spinal network is known as the center pattern generator or CPG. So from CPG, efferent signals travels through motor neurons to activate specific muscles group needed for that particular movement. At the same time, the body continuously provides afferent feedback from the proprioceptors in muscles and joints and from other mechanical receptors in the skins. So this sensory feedback directly modulates motor commands through reflex pathways. So both monosynaptic and polysynaptic, making movements more efficient and helping maintain stability, especially if there is an unexpected disturbance. Additionally, sensory information is sent back to the brain, where it integrates with visual, auditory, and vestibular inputs, enabling us to maintain balance, orientation, and precise control over movement. So, motor control is not just a one-way signal from the brain to muscles. Actually, it's a dynamic feedback loop that constantly adjusts movement for accuracy and stability. So now an important point to remember is that movement control doesn't starts only when the muscle contracts. Actually, it begins much earlier. So before you even move your limb, your nervous system is already planning the action. It determines the essential details. That means how much force will it be needed, what will be the timing for the muscle activation, and the coordination between different muscle groups. The preparation phase is very crucial because it allows the movement to be smooth and efficient. But actually, it doesn't stop there only. Even as the movement is happening, the nervous system continuously monitors and adjusts muscle forces, timing, and tone. So it compares what's actually happening. That means the movement performance with the original motor plan and makes correction in real time. So, uh, like our body constantly gathers sensory information from the environment, like visual cues, the proprioceptive feedback from the muscles and joints, and even the tactile information through touch. It perceives the situation, select what it thinks is the most appropriate movement plan to achieve the goal, and then coordinates this plan to the CNS, central nervous system. And finally, the plan is executed via motor neurons in the brainstem and spinal cord, which send signals to Postural muscles to maintain stability, limb muscles to perform the desired action, and even head and neck muscles for fine adjustment. All of this happens in a precisely timed sequence, allowing you to perform even very complex tasks like reaching for an object or taking a step very smoothly and accurately. So let's think about what happens after we actually make a movement. So when we move, let's say we reach out to grab a pen, and that movement itself sends sensory feedback signal to the brain. Now, why is this feedback is so important? So, well, it helps the brain in three ways. First, it lets us make adjustments while we are still moving. For example, if the pen starts to slip, we can immediately tight our grip. Second, it tells us whether we have actually reached the or achieved the goal. So, did we successfully pick up the pen, hold it the pen? And third, it allows the nervous system to store that information so that next time we try for the same movement, it becomes a little smoother and more precise. So now here's something very interesting. Like when we repeat the same movement many times, our body starts to develop a preferred movement pattern. And over the time, this patterns becomes more automatic, and we don't have to continuously think about every single detail. If this movement pattern is correct and efficient, then we have developed a skill. So we can think about how awkward it feels when we first time learn something new, like typing or balancing a bicycle. But with practice, it becomes very effortless. So, but if the pattern is incorrect or inefficient, it becomes an abnormal movement pattern, which can infer with how well we perform the task. And in rehabilitation, this is exactly what we work to correct. So, repeated practice shapes whether a movement becomes a skill or a habit that needs retraining. Now, let's discuss why it is so important for us to understand motor control. So, when we look at how we produce movements, whether they are reflexive, like quickly pulling out our hand or our body from something very hot, or automatic, like walking without thinking, or adaptive, where we adjust our body as per the changes in the environment, or even voluntary, like reaching for a cup, mm, or any other grabs activity. So all these involves multiple body systems. These input systems, like our sensory feedback, output system, like our muscles, and of course, central processing within the nervous system that plans, coordinate, and monitors these actions. So understanding motor control helps us in many ways. Theories of motor control provide a framework to explain how we perform motor skills, what potential we have, what constraints or limitations might exist, and what kind of deficit can appear when the system is damaged. So, for clinical experts and researchers, this knowledge is very crucial because it actually allows us to identify problem in motor performance, develop treatment strategies to help and improve or restore the movement, and evaluate whether those interventions are really effective over time or not. So, selecting the right model of motor control becomes very important when analyzing or treating individuals with postural or movement dysfunctions. So, in crux, understanding Motor control is just uh, not knowing about how we move. It's about knowing how to help when movement is going wrong. So now if we see the key concept in motor control, so there are two basic concepts. One is motor program and another one is central pattern generator. So in motor program, or sometimes we refer is at MP, can be thought of as a learned behavior pattern, a kind of neural network that can produce rhythmic movement patterns even without constant sensory input or conscious control from the brain. So let's see what does it mean for us. Well, in MP and motor pattern contains a set of movement commands or rules that define the details of skilled motor action. So it specifies which muscles are needed, the order in which they are activated, how much force they generate, the timing, the sequence, and even the duration of each contraction. And why this is important? Because motor program help us to manage the huge number of degree of freedom in our body. There are so many joints and muscles that could move in so many ways, but the motor program coordinates them into a smooth and purposeful action. Now, there is also a concept of generalized motor program, that is GMP. So instead of dictating every tiny detail of a movement, a GMP defines the overall patterns of movement, allowing flexibility so it can adjust and adapt to different environments or task commands. Even though we don't have hard physical evidence of MPs or GMPs as discrete structure, the concept is widely accepted because it explains how we perform complex coordinated movements so efficiently. So let's take a simple example, walking. Once we learn how to walk in, it becomes a relatively automatic and rhythmic movement pattern. The neural command in the brain, the neural command in the brain and spinal cord responsible for walking are shaped by early experiences and continuous practice. When we decide to walk, the brain simply initiates the walking motor pattern, the walking motor program. The neural circuits then send signals to the relevant muscles, coordinating contractions and relaxation in the correct sequence. This creates rhythmic leg movements alternating between left and right, propelling the body forward. But here's the interesting part. While the motor program controls the basic pattern, it still uses sensory feedback. So if the ground is uneven or there is an obstacle, the program adapts, adjusting our step length, speed, and balance in real time. So in short, motor programs gives us a structured, efficient way to produce movement while still leaving room for adaptation and flexibility whenever it is needed or required. Okay, so now let's talk about an important distinction in motor control, and there are two different programs. The first one, motor program, and generalized motor program. So a motor program is like a pre-structured, highly specific set of commands stored in our nervous system. So it's learned, it's stored, and it contains detailed instructions for the precise sequence and timing of muscle contraction required for a very particular moment. So once a motor program is initiated, it pretty much runs to completion without needing continuous conscious control. It's almost like pressing play on a very specific movement recording. For example, if we think about playing a piano piece, when a piano player sits down to play a specific piece of music, there's a motor program dedicated to that sequence of note. It includes instruction about which finger press which key, the timing of each note, and even the dynamics, how loud or how soft the note should sound. Once they start, the motor program runs, and the piano player can focus more on expressions rather than conscious control over every single keystrokes. And now, if we see the generalized motor program or the GMP, so it is a bit different. Instead of being so rigid and detailed, it's more abstract. It defines a general movement pattern but allows flexibility. So it's like a template for a class of movements rather than one exact movement. So if we take a example of throwing a ball, the GMP for the throwing defines the overall pattern, how the arm moves back, how the body shifts weight, how the arm accelerates forward, but it doesn't lock the exact force, angle, or release point. That means we can adapt the same throwing pattern whether we are tossing a light tennis ball gently or maybe a heavy basketball with higher force. So the key difference between the two of this is the level of specificity. So motor program are highly specific, controlling one exact movement with detailed instruction. Generalized motor program are flexible patterns that can be modified to meet different demands like adjusting speed, force, or spatial orientation. Both works together to give us efficiency and flexibility. Motor programs gives us precision when needed, while the generalized motor program let us adapt to wide range of situations without learning a completely new movement every time. So the another key aspect of motor control is center pattern generator or CPG. So a CPG is essentially a neural network located in the spinal cord or brainstem that's responsible for generating rhythmic and coordinated motor pattern. So if you think of a movement like walking, swimming, breathing, or even chewing, all of these having a rhythmic nature. So what's this very special about the CPG? That it can produce these rhythmic and repetitive movements without needing constant sensory feedback or direct signal from the brain. In other words, once the pattern is initiated, it can run automatically. They are part of what we call center pattern generator circuitry, which means they can operate independently from higher level brain control. So even if we are not continuously thinking about each step we take while walking, the CPG is quietly coordinating those leg movements in the background. And again, why it is important? Well, it shows how movement can be maintained even with minimal conscious effort, which is evolutionary significant. Animals, including human, can carry out vital rhythmic tasks like walking or breathing while focusing their brain power on other things like scanning the environment for danger or other opportunities. So here's one very uh, good example like CPG for walking is located in the spinal cord. So even in case where someone suffers a spinal cord injury that disconnects the brain from the lower body, reaches lower body, and research shows that CPG can still generate rhythmic leg movement. So of course, it wouldn't fully restore walking without higher control, but the basic rhythmic pattern is still there. So when we put it together with motor program, we see the bigger picture. Motor program helps us control specific skilled action, while CPG handles rhythmic, automatic, and repetitive movements. Both of these work hand in hand together throughout our life and helps us to develop, refine, produce, and even recover motor control. So, if we summarize in short, like CPG, central pattern generator, keep the rhythm of life going, while motor patterns add the precision and detail needed for the complex skill. Uh, now, let's move to another important perspective in motor control, the ecological model. This model highlights that motor control doesn't happen in isolation. Instead, it's shaped by the interaction between three key concepts: the person, the task, and the environment. So, why it is important? Well, motor control evolves so that we can cope up with the environmental conditions around us. So, if we can think about it, like every time we move, it's to achieve something specific in a particular setting. So, we can further break down this. Let's say the person represents all our body structures and function, both the healthy and the impaired one. So it's everything we bring to the situation. The task, the task is the goal directed behavior. It's the challenge or the problem where we are trying to solve, like let's say picking up a cup, crossing the street, or writing with a pen. The environment is everything around us: object, surface, obstacles, even social factors. Anything outside the body that influence the movement is part of the environment. So when we want to achieve a movement goal, we first focus on detecting information in the immediate environment. This is the perception. We actively observe, explore, and analyze what's around us. Based on that, we choose the most suitable and efficient way to complete the task. What's really interesting is that these three elements, person, task, and environment, are all dynamics and constantly changing. For example, the same person might move differently depending on whether the surface is slippery, whether they are carrying something heavy, or whether they are tired or energetic. So, the ecological model tells us that motor control is not fixed, it's flexible and adaptive because it has to continuously respond to these interaction between our body, the task demands, and the environment. So, in nutshell, we don't just move randomly, we move with a purpose to meet a goal within a specific environment, and we constantly adapt our motor plan to achieve that particular goal efficiently. So, the ecological model helps us see motor control as a dynamic relationship between who we are and what we are trying to do and the world around us. Now, if we further talk about the body structures and the functions that contribute to controlling human posture and movement, and how sensory information plays a crucial role in motor control. So, when we think about movement, we often picture muscle contracting and joint movements, but it's much complex. So, movement is the result of a highly coordinated interaction between sensory system, the central nervous system, and the musculoskeletal system. So, let's start with the role of sensory information. So, every movement we make is guided and refined uh, by information coming from our sensory system. Let's say from vision, we get details about the surroundings, the locations of the object, and our orientation in the space. From proprioceptors in our muscles and joints, we get feedback about the position and movement of body parts. From vestibular system, we sense balance, motion, and spatial orientation. And from the skin's uh, sensors, we feel contact with surface texture and external forces. All these sensory input flows into the central nervous system, where it integrates and interpreted by the CNS. So the CNS then uses all these information to plan, adjust, and execute the movement. Now, further, we can discuss about the choice of motor pattern and voluntary movement control. So when we decide to move voluntarily, say reaching for a cup, the brain first forms a movement plan. It determines which muscle are needed, in what order they should activate, how much force to use, and how long each contraction should last. So this plan is shaped by previous experience and by the sensory information we are receiving in real time. Once the plan is ready, motor commands travels down through the brainstem and spinal cord to the muscles. But the process doesn't stop there. As soon as the movement begins, the sensory feedback starts flowing back to the CNS, allowing continuous adjustments like fine tuning the grip if cup feels heavier than expected or correction balance if we feel unstable. So voluntary movements is not a one-way process. It's a dynamic loop of planning, execution, and feedback. So, in simple terms, to maintain posture and perform controlled, purposeful movements, we rely on the ongoing conversations between sensory input, central processing unit, and motor outputs. Without this constant interaction, movement would be clumsy, maybe unstable, and very poorly coordinated. So, the posture and movement control are really about how well our body sense, process, and responds to the environment. So now, when we talk about the motor control, we are really talking about a beautiful uh, coordinated process where the brain, spinal cord, muscles, and sensory systems all work together to produce a smooth, purposeful movement. The key part of this process is sensory information. Without it, this sensory information, the brain would have no idea where the body is in the space and how it's interacting with the environment. So, what kind of sensory inputs are actually involved? So, first we have the somatosensory system, which includes two main types of receptors. One is extrareceptor located in the skin and the mucous membrane tells us what's happening outside the body. They sense touch, pressure, temperature, and pain. Things like feeling the texture on an object or detecting a sharp surface, all these things like is for that the extroreceptors are responsible. Then we have the proprioceptors, so which are deep inside the muscle, tendons, and joints. These are like our body internal GPS. So they constantly report the position of our limb, the amount of muscle tension, and the speed of the movement. So the proprioception is what allows us to close our eyes and still know where our arms and leg are. Next, we have the vestibular system located in the inner ear. It helps us maintain balance and spatial orientation. This system tells us the brain how the head is moving relative to gravity. So we can keep our eyes still, steady, stay upright, and coordinate movement even when we are walking on uneven ground or turning quickly. And of course, vision plays a huge role. Visual input helps us to guide movements, judge distances, avoid obstacles, and stay oriented in space. All these sensory information, touch, proprioception, vestibular system, and vision is constantly following into the contributing into the central nervous system. When it's integrated and used to adjust posture and refine motor commands in real time. When any one of these systems is disrupted, motor control suffers. For example, if the vestibular system is damaged, it can lead to dizziness, vertigo, or maybe poor balance. Now we look deeper into how sensory information supports motor control. So there are several key types of sensory feedback that play a very vital role in guiding our movement. So first, let's talk about proprioception. So proprioception is our internal sense of body, position and movement. It allows us to know where our limbs are in space, how fast they are moving, and how much tension is in our muscles, all without having to look. For example, when we close our eyes and touch our nose, proprioception is what makes that possible. Within this proprioceptive system, there are specialized sensors. So, first one is muscle spindles. So, these muscle spindles are tiny sensory receptors embedded within the muscle fiber themselves. So they constantly monitor how long the muscle is stressed and how quickly the length is changing. And this feedback helps the nervous system to regulate muscle contraction and maintain precise control of movement. The other one example is Golgi tendons organ. So on the other hand, these are located in the tendons. They detect changes in the muscle tension, acting as a safety mechanism. If a muscle is undergoing too much force, the Golgi tendon organ help relax it to prevent injury and ensure smooth force regulation. Next, we have somato sensation, so which involves sensory information from the skin, the cutaneous receptors in the skin, like uh, Merkel cells detect touch, pressure, and vibration. So these tactile feedback is critical when we interact with objects, like adjusting our grip on a delicate glass or sensing when an object is slipping from the hand. We also have thermal receptors that sense changing in temperature. So this helps us adapt our motor response to different environmental condition. For example, gripping an object more carefully if it is very hot or cold. So all these sensory systems work together constantly, feeding information to the brain and spinal cord. So we can fine tune our posture and movements in real time. Without this rich sensory feedback, our movements would be clumsy, uncoordinated, and maybe unsafe. Sensation. Two more critical sensory systems helps like shape our and refine our motor control, that is vision and vestibular system. So vision information is essential for spatial awareness. It helps us understand where objects are in the environment, their distance and their movement relative to us. This spatial information is vital for planning and executing accurate movements such as reaching for a cup or navigating through a crowded space. Vision also contributes to object recognition, enabling us to identify and interact with specific items. For example, when we see a pen, our brain automatically plans to uh, a precise grip and movement needed to pick it up. And finally, visual feedback provides real-time information about the accuracy of our movements. If we see our hand wearing off target while reaching for something, we can immediately correct it. This continuous feedback loop ensures precise and smooth uh, motor performance. And now, if we see the vestibular system that is located deep within the inner ear, this system is like the body's internal gyroscope. So it provides critical information about head position and movement, helping us to maintain balance and spatial orientation even when our body is in motion. So when we change direction, tilt our head or move quickly, the vestibular system helps. uh, coordinate our movements with the environment, ensuring we remain stable and upright. So without a properly functioning vestibular system, even simple tasks like standing still or walking straight can feel disorganized, leading to dizziness or imbalance. So together, vision and vestibular system complement proprioception and somatosensation, forming an integrated network of sensory feedback. And this multisensory input allows us to plan, adjust, and execute movement with mm, good accuracy, even in complex or changing environments. So, okay, student. So we will stop our discussion here, and in next session we will continue with the discussion. So thank you for your attention.